Hi guys, so today we're going to be talking about factoring polynomials, and this is a new unit. So while I'm introducing this, I want you guys to get started and set up your notebooks for a new unit. So please make sure you are setting up your table of contents. This is Unit 10, Factoring Polynomials. Today's topic is going to be 319, Factoring GCF. Whatever your page number is, you can just continue that from your own notebook. So again, like I said, please make sure you're setting up your notebook, fold your paper, and on the front, make sure to write Unit 10, Factoring Polynomials. We're not going to have a vocab sheet, so don't worry about this section. If at any point I'm moving too fast in the video, please feel free to pause, continue copying. But I'm going to keep moving along, and you can pause and move at your own pace. So this is what your notebook setup is going to look like. Your do now box, your vocab, and make sure to split the bottom note section into 4. All right, we are going to be taking notes. You're not going to be getting printed notes since you are going to be getting some practice that's printed. So just to save some trees, we are going to be practicing some note-taking skills again as we finish up the year in this unit. So for our do now, what comes to mind when you hear the term GCF, or greatest common factor? I'm hoping that this is something that you remember, or you maybe don't remember the definition, but it comes to mind like, oh, I've heard that word before. Okay, so a GCF is the greatest common factor. And what that means is 2 or more numbers. It's the greatest number that divides evenly into both of those numbers. So when I'm talking about any factors, so for example, a factor of 2 would be 1 times 2, because they both divide evenly into 1 and 2. When we're talking about the greatest common factor, we're talking about in 2 different numbers. What's the same number that divides into those? That's the biggest. So we're going to do some examples. So again, in that bottom note section, please fill this in. Again, if you need to pause at any time, please do so. But I'm going to keep moving. So make sure you have everything on my screen and what I am writing in your notebook. Okay, so greatest common factors of 12 and 4. So I want to start by making a list of what numbers multiply or divide into 12 and 4. I'm sorry, into 12 and 30. So 1 times 12, 2 times 6, and 3 times 4. Now for 30, we have 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, 5 times 6. Let's say you're not good at your multiplication facts. For this unit, you're going to need to practice those. So what you can do is start in the back of your notebooks or in the back of the planner. You can use your multiplication table to help you answer these questions. However, on your test and on your unit exam, you're not going to be able to have that. So we want to make sure that we are practicing our multiplication facts as we move through the unit. And maybe that's something you need to do on your own at home. But definitely in class, make sure to have those multiplication facts handy. So looking at these two, what is the biggest number that both of these have in common? So 1 is in both. They both have 1 in common. They both have 2 in common. But again, I'm looking for the greatest. That's what that G stands for. That greatest and that biggest number that's in both of my 2 terms. So 3 is in both. But again, my biggest in this case would be 6. So my GCF for 12 and 30 is 6. All right, let's look at the next one. So the next one has a variable. We're doing the same thing, but also we're talking about our variables. So 6m would be 1 and 6, and 2 and 3. And then there's just one m in that scenario. 1 and 4, 2 times 2. Now remember, m squared, we talked about anything with a squared has m times m. That's basically what an m squared is. So now I'm looking for the biggest number in both of these. So the biggest number would be 2. But I'm also looking for the biggest number of variables I can take out. So I see 1m here. And I see 2 here, but I can only take 1 with me since there's only 1 here. So that means our GCF is going to be 2m. At this point, I want you to pause the video. I want you to try number 3 and 4 on your own. And then when you are done, you can hit play and watch me go over it. Okay? So at this point, pause the video, try numbers 3 and 4, then press play when you're ready to see the answers. So at this point, you've paused and you've tried them. So let's go over them. 1 and 4, 2 and 2, 1 and 9, 3 and 3, and this is X. So I don't see an X in both, so that's definitely not going to be my GCF. I don't see any larger numbers. My biggest number that's in both is a 1, and that's okay. Sometimes we might have a GCF of 1. All right, and the next one, we have 42a cubed and 63a squared. 1 and 42, 2 and 21. We have 3 and 14. And 6 and 7. 63, we have 1 and 63. 63 does not divide by 2. 63 divides by 3, though. And it also divides by 7. All right, and then keep in mind that this one has an a cubed, so a times a times a, and this one has an a squared, so a times a. All right, and we're looking for the biggest thing in both of those. The biggest number first is 21, and then our biggest variable. So I have an a and an a, but I have more. So this time I'm going to take out more than 1. So that means my GCF is going to be 21a squared because I'm taking 2 with me in both. All right, so that's how we find GCF. That's what's going to help us with factoring today. Okay, so now we need to factor a GCF out of a binomial. Binomial or trinomial, doesn't matter, but basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to factor out something from our expression 4x plus 14. So just like we practiced, we're going to make a list of factors from those two things. So 1 and 4, 2 and 2. 1 and 14, 2 and 7. All right, so I'm going to take out my GCF. So I'm going to circle it. Step 2. Make sure as we're going through this that you pause the video and do copy down your steps, and you're setting up your notebook exactly the way it looks on my tablet. So I have 2 sides split down the middle, and now we're writing the example. If you need to pause and do that, please make sure to go ahead and do that. So step 1, make a list of factors. We have that. Step 2, circle our GCF. So my GCF in this case is going to be 2. Now what we're going to do is we're going to divide our original problem. So our original problem was 4x plus 14. And we're going to divide that by 2. All right? But I need to write my answer for that. So while I'm dividing those things, I want to write my simplified answer. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. X divided by nothing is just x. 14 divided by 2 is 7. So that's my answer. And how we write this is we are going to put our GCF, which was 2. Remember, our GCF was 2. On the outside, and inside parentheses, we're going to take our solution and write it inside. So our final answer is going to be 2x plus 7 in parentheses and 2 on the outside. So that's what it looks like when we factor. All right, the next example, number 2, 30x squared plus 18x. We're going to do the same exact thing. So start by making a list of factors. Step 1, 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, 5 and 6. 18. 1 and 18. 2 and 9. 3 and 6. And for some of you, it might be super clear what the GCF is right away. So feel free to skip the step of making the list, but I just want us to get used to it in the beginning so we make sure we see all of our numbers, just in case we forget any. All right, so for this one, I see my GCF is 6, but we also have x's involved, so we can take out 1x. So that means our GCF is going to be 6x. So for this one, when we're dividing our original, we're not just dividing a number, we're dividing a whole term. So I'm dividing this by 6x. All right, so think of this as x squared as 2 x's, right? We've talked about that. So when I'm dividing 30 by 6, let's start with our numbers, I get 5. And when I'm dividing 18 by 6, I get 3. When I'm dividing my x's, think of as the opposite of when we were multiplying them. Now we're getting rid of, so we're subtracting exponents. But think of it, we can also cross it out. I have 1x on top. I can cancel 1x on the bottom. So that means I'm just left with an x. And here I have 1x on top and another on the bottom. So then I'm left with nothing. So my solution that's going to go inside my parentheses is going to be 5x plus 3. And outside, don't forget, is going to be our GCF, which was 6x. So our final answer is going to be 6x, parentheses, 5x plus 3. All right, so let's pause here. All right, so what I want you guys to do is I want you to think about this one. This one has 3 expressions. It's one expression, but 3 terms in the expression. And same thing, but now I see that there's a negative in all 3. I see the first term has an x squared, the second has an x, and the last term doesn't have anything. And then our numbers, we're going to do that same process. Now when we have 3 terms, it's the same process. We want to circle our GCF that's in all 3. So I definitely see a negative in all 3. And I see a 4 in all 3. But there's no x's in all 3 because this last term doesn't have any. So our GCF is going to be negative 4. And I'm just writing that off to the side. So here's my original. We're going to divide by our GCF. Our GCF is negative 4. Remember, a negative divided by a negative is going to give us a positive. So I'm going to get a positive 4x squared. Here I'm going to get a positive 1x. And here I'm going to get a positive 2. So that's going to go inside my parentheses. And outside my parentheses is going to be my GCF, which was negative 4. That's my final answer. So at this point, I'm hoping some of you notice what this looks like. It almost looks like we need to distribute this, right? Because that's what we're used to seeing so far. However, factoring is the opposite of distribution. So we don't want to distribute because what we just did was the process of taking it out. So factoring is finding that biggest thing that's in all of those terms and taking it out and putting it on the outside. So right now, you're going to practice. There is a worksheet, a front and a back. Your teacher will be over in a minute to check in with you and see how the video went. So if you have any questions, make sure to jot it down so that way when they come over, you know exactly what to do. If at any point you get stuck during the practice, feel free to use this video and go back and rewatch anything to help you understand better. Good luck.